of intrinsic value goes all the way back to the start of 2006. I felt myself like I had probably never amounted to very much, or should I say that I felt that my worth, certainly to myself, was based on what I could achieve and what sort of person I could turn myself into. Now, intrinsic value is a bit contrary to that. Intrinsic value is a biblical principle which basically says that all human beings, without any distinguishment at all, have value. And they have value for two reasons. They have value first because they are human and they are made by God. And secondly, they have value because they are made in His likeness. They are made in the image of God. And because of that, just by mere existence, you have a basic self-worth. And I hadn't really, that wasn't something that I'd addressed at all. You know, people that can get depressed often are pessimists, often don't have much self-worth, and therefore it's sort of not really surprising that I hadn't accepted it. In 2006, something happened, and I'll explain what happened. I had left London. That's my phone. I'd left university and I'd had a difficult 2 or 3 years since leaving university, and I had, through no fault of my own, ended up back in my parents' in a town that I didn't particularly want to be. And I felt a bit discouraged, to be totally honest, like I'd sort of failed really to amount to much. And in the start of 2006, having become interested in mixed martial arts, which was something I'd seen on the television, something I'd seen through borrowing a DVD, in fact, and I can't remember what it was called, like the Ultimate Knockout and Submission thing or something, I can't remember what it was, but it got me interested in it, and I started to research it, and I realised that there was a television channel on which I could watch it for free, and so I did, and I got quite into it. And I decided that I was going to join the forum of Matt Hughes, who was prodigy, so to speak, the little protege of the guy who I had really been interested in, and that was Patrick Miletich. And so I got to know the sort of team, the camp that was surrounding Patrick, and Matt was one of them, and he had a forum that was open for a couple of months at that point. I think it opened in the late 2005, so it was relatively new. Do you know, I found that I could get on there with the people that were there, mainly Americans, although not completely. And I found that I could participate, and that there were plenty of people, particularly in the early stage, that I could learn from. And I became reasonably good at being a watcher of the sport, really. And when circumstances changed, I became the top poster on the forum, and it gave me something to do on the evening, because I was heavily in debt after coming out of London, and I had not a lot to do on an evening really. I'd moved into rented accommodation, which wasn't particularly brilliant, and so I used to come home from work and spend 5 or 6 hours online doing that. Now, that grew Okay, and by 2007 I was wanting to go and meet some of these people, and therein lied a little bit of a problem because they were over the other side of the world, and you know, my nan did very well in sort of giving me the money basically to be able to go on tour to the US. And I did go on tour to the US, and I stayed with friends that I'd only ever met online, although we had been speaking to each other online for, you know, years, well, for a year, every single day. So I knew them quite well. And they introduced me to the actual people who were participants in the sport. People like Matt Hughes, people eventually like Jens Pulver, and other people that I met on my second tour out there, as well as being able to meet some of the people face to face, or at least having conversations with them on the phone. And subsequently, of course, I was able then to write about my experience, and I was able to give that to MMA websites to host. So that was 2007. In 2008, something else happened. So whilst this was going on, I had developed the ability to do this, to put online videos, and I happened to visit one of the local mixed martial arts companies that was based in Liverpool, and my videos of that event went online, caught the attention of one of the owners, and a bit of a friendship occurred, in which I would go for free and watch the event backstage and get to know the participants there, some of which have gone on now to actually, you know, being in the UFC. People like Paul Sass, for example. Stefan Struve was another one. I knew them in Cage Gladiators before they were in the UFC. You know, the Entourage came across to London in 2008 as well, and I went down to London and I was part of that, which was fantastic. And by now I had sort of had a couple of years of reasonably good experiences with this, combined with the fact that there was a deeply devout Christian approach to the forum. I was compelled to actually start to believe through evidence that perhaps I did have worth, perhaps intrinsic value was true. And I read the bit in the Gospels about intrinsic value, and the way it's expressed is like this. God cares for birds, for sparrows, and not a single sparrow dies without, you know, God's knowledge and God's care of that. And then he goes on to say that human beings are worth a lot more than sparrows. And this got me thinking, and what I would usually do when I had come to some sort of revelation like this is I would have a tattoo to remind me of that, in case I ever, you know, got into a situation where I wanted to forget it. But I didn't have the money. So instead I bought a bird. Now, I couldn't buy a sparrow because they don't sell sparrows anymore. You get them for free if you have a you have a hole in your roof. So I bought the dearest I could, and it turned out to be Jens the Budgie, and that was in 2009. Now I have to say that things have moved on slightly. You know, the sites that hosted my writing have all folded. I don't have the money now to go on tour anymore. The local MMA productions that I were involved with, those were casualties of the recession, and Matt Hughes has now retired, and the forum is slowly drying up. So a lot has moved on, and we're maybe not having quite such favourable times in that respect anymore. But the truth remains. And of course, that's why the death of Jens the Budgie last year was so difficult for me. Not because I had spent so long with Jens, and because I cared for the Budgie deeply, but actually because of what he stood for. Now I know that budgies don't last forever, and his death doesn't mean that it was all false and all wrong. Neither does the change in circumstances, which are perhaps not quite as favourable. The truth remains that intrinsic value is true and something that I accept. But that's a little bit of the background as to sort of how it happened. And I have to say that there is a lot more involved in that than it sounds, because from 2009 onwards, whilst the forums and the MMA scene were perhaps sort of not quite as favourable towards me as they had been, my acceptance of intrinsic value and my willingness then to listen to God in certain ways meant that my relationship with God was moved on significantly. And that really is something that I'm still going through at the moment, and so not really able to talk about very coherently. That's something that will probably come up in a couple of years' time. But this is the statement that I wanted to make on intrinsic value to mark the 1-year anniversary, I suppose, of the death of James the Budgie.